Okay, welcome back, folks. Welcome back. And as I said on the show today, we got Conspiracy Kyle wrote a book called Intergalactic Totalitarianism, which for me is hard to say. It's not easy to roll off the tongue. I'll tell you that right now, but it's all good. And let me tell you a little bit about the book. It says, how does a democracy turn itself into a dictatorship? This is the question that George Lucas asked when he started writing the Star Wars prequel trilogy in the mid-90s. In this book, Conspiracy Kyle chronicles the authoritarian tactics and the traits by Palpatine in the prequels as he rose from senator to chancellor to emperor. These machinations are compared to methods used by totalitarian leaders and authoritarian psychopaths in our world. Spoiler alert, they are very similar. So if that interests you, goodness gracious, this is going to be a great show. Welcome to the show, Conspiracy Kyle. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, the title is kind of a mouthful. I think it's like 35 syllables or something like that. I thought, I should either make it like a college course, right? Like intro to Total, or like I should have just called it like Space Hitler. I could have gone with, but like I also didn't want to have a book like with Hitler in the
On the title, yeah,
Right.
probably
attached to my
not.
name. So I don't know how well that would have gone. But
Yeah.
no, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about this and break it down a little bit.
Indeed. So, people can't see this, unfortunately, but I don't do the video, but I'm looking at you and stuff. You have an amazing Star Wars swag in the back that only I could ever wish I could be allowed to buy. I'm not allowed to buy as a married man, that kind of stuff. I'm kidding. But yeah, no, that's amazing setup. So, we want to get right into it. By the way, Maverick over here also upswagged me. I don't appreciate that right now, but it's all good. No worries. So I just want the people to know, who is this Conspiracy Kyle? Introduce yourself a little bit. Why do you call yourself that? What's your show about? And let's go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So, 2020, I think like a lot of people early on in the year, I think a lot of people started figuring out that something was not right with all the medical nonsense.
Right.
I think we've all talked about it ad nauseum.
Right.
We don't really need to get too into it here, but I think
Right.
we all started to realize. A lot of people have already understood that things were crazy with the government and conspiracy and stuff. But for me, I kind of started. My brain just the wheels started turning. I'm like, something's not right here, and I wanted to try to find a way to put out some of the research that I was doing into what was going on and what has gone on in history that that governments over the years historically have done, to the people, in the background, that a lot that is sometimes hidden. And I wanted to try to make it a little bit more relatable, use some kind of parallels in current media and what have you. And so I thought about it. I said, I love Star Wars. I know a lot about Star Wars. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in there that could kind of parallel things that are going on with all these conspiracy theories in our world. And sure enough, there was a ton of stuff. And so in about mid 2020, I started a podcast called Conspiracy in the Force, which I've been doing every week since then. Which I kind of break down things going on in our world and how they relate to the Star Wars universe. Whether it's things like transhumanism, right? Like people become us becoming robots, right? There's a lot of robotic stuff in Star Wars. Whether it's government/economic stuff, which I think we'll get into with the prequel trilogy, really dives into that, or just ways the government lies to us, or ways the government tells us that they want to try to keep us safe, but really it's all about more control for them, which in my mind is really what the story of the Star Wars prequel trilogy is all about, which is kind of the basis of my book. So I've been doing that podcast ever since mid 2020, and then last year, I started talking on doing some guest spots on some shows, and started coming up with this idea of really laying this stuff out, movie for movie throughout all the prequels. You see the character Palpatine gain more and more and more control. And the way he does that is very subversive. And looking into our world, you see dictators, totalitarian leaders, authoritarians, even people nowadays that people may not consider them to be, authoritarians or what have you. They're using these same tactics and traits. And what that will lead to, is anyone's guess. I think it's from my standpoint, with a biblical perspective, it's all going to turn into a one world government at some point in the future. The question is whether it's this generation or future. But anyways, I wanted to try to relate that to Star Wars and show how what Palpatine did to become the Emperor is the same playbook that you see in our world. And the interesting thing to me was that George Lucas in those movies really laid it out, really laid it on thick, like more than you see in a lot of Hollywood movies nowadays. Almost like he's given away the playbook
Mm,
of how these people operate,
mm.
because it's very kind of on the nose, and we'll definitely go through some of those examples and parallels. But I thought it was a really good way to kind of use metaphors and things to get people to understand more about what's going on in our world, using something that a lot of people know, which is Star Wars, one of the most popular franchises of all time.
Right. I was, yeah, it's an interesting point because I've heard a little bit of this conversation in the conspiracy world, as they say. Um, like, I don't know if you've heard, but like Stanley Kubrick, for example, they were saying that he wasn't really, because there's always this idea that writers, producers are just all in this, secret society kind of thing. And they're writing these things. And, but there seems to be controversy, like with Stanley, and even I've heard it with George, that, yeah, they might have been in something like that, but they were more out to expose certain things than anything else. But I don't know. Like I can't say. I can never. I always look at this stuff, and in the end, it's kind of speculative. But I can
Yeah,
definitely feel like a lot of these movies do expose certain things, and they just kind of bring it out to the open. I definitely saw that in the Kubrick
right.
films, where I'm like, whoa, he's I mean, he's probably one of the most overt directors. Pretty much saying there's a lot of
Yeah.
weird shenanigans going on in the background.
Right. Yeah, I would definitely say, the directors like Lucas and Kubrick back in like the 70s, I think they had a lot more leeway, right? Like, whereas you
Right.
compare it to nowadays with, every movie, it's like a Marvel movie, right? It's this big, huge studio, this big, massive Disney, Marvel, what have you, are coordinating all these efforts and all these narratives to put into these movies. So there's a lot of hands in the pot,
Mm-hmm.
right, of what they want in these movies. Whereas back in the day, it was more or less they had a lot of more creative freedom, and
Mm.
they didn't have a lot of people breathing down their neck, looking over their shoulder, saying, "Hey, you need to put this and this into it." So yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, there's kind of a great argument to be had that some of the stuff that's in there could be predictive type programming, right? Especially with Star Wars, the fact that robots, a lot of times in the movies, they're the ones that save the day. A lot like R2D2. Look at him; he's an awesome character. You almost think of him just as a human,
Right.
because in pretty much every movie, he does something heroic to save the day that they wouldn't have been able to defeat the evil without this robot.
Mm.
So there's some things, but you can kind of put that either, well, in one of two camps, right? Maybe just Lucas thought, hey, that's a really cool thing to have for a sci-fi movie. The other hand as well, getting people prepared for a future that is robotic driven, which I'm sure we're going down in the future. But to your main point, was that his main intent, or did he just think that was a cool story idea?
Yeah,
I think there's a definite conversation to be had there.
or even I've kind of seen a connection between the droids and the hobbits, right? So R2D2 is essentially Frodo with the ring in episode 4, right? No one really cares about the droids. Give them to the
Mm.
Right.
droids, right? Can travel around. They can't even go in the cantina.
Oh, that's right.
So it's like, yeah, we're gonna have him hold it and carry it because no
Yeah.
one cares about you,
Right.
kind of a thing
Yeah.
too.
It's that concept of using like the little guy to defeat the, as the underdog to defeat the big. The same like what they did with the Ewoks, right? The Empire's, beating down these Ewoks, like, oh, they don't stand a chance. But Lucas's point was, the little guy can win in some of these situations, and kind of having that concept of hope. So yeah, I'm with you there.
I have a question. You want me to jump in whenever you're ready?
Yeah,
Yeah, go
okay.
ahead.
So let me just say we came back. All right, we had to switch over to Skype. This was, my Zoom, I guess, wants me to buy it now. I didn't do that before. So thanks for the patience. And Maverick, Nikolai, you had a question?
Yeah. So going back to original trilogy, or some would say the only trilogy, depending on what camp you're in, I suppose. But with the original trilogy, the politics didn't seem the same as the prequels, and obviously a lot of the story focused on the government and the rise of power and things like that a little bit more than in the original trilogy, episodes 4, 5, and 6. But what I thought was interesting was you had A New Hope, episode 4 film, and then the Indiana Jones franchise started, and it is very focused on Nazis. Do you think there was a shift with the original trilogy had in mind that sort of totalitarian or fascist regime versus the prequels that seem to have a lot more of a globalist kind of push that was very different? Do you think there was a shift there? Do you think there's a progression?
Yeah, I think it's probably they're probably it's just it might be a product of the times that they came out too. While you don't see a lot of politics in the original trilogy, you do see, Lucas makes it very black and white. Yeah. So to your point, the difference between the original trilogy and the prequels, in the original trilogy, it's very black and white. Like even literally in the color schemes, you know who's good and you know who's
Mm.
bad
Mhm.
by the exact colors. I mean, the Empire was like very black and white, like with some red, like very Nazi type colors. And then the other people they had orange jumpsuits and all this other stuff. So in the color schemes, he wanted to make it very black and white. This is good, this is bad, because he wanted to tell just kind of a true morality tale. Whereas then the older he got, I think, and probably more wise to what was going on in politics, and he thought that really it's not really that simple. And that's why in the prequels you see, well, for one, yeah, you see the rise of that totalitarian empire, but you also see this noble republic basically crumble in and of itself. There's a great quote, to the original movie. George Lucas wrote like a companion novel with it, and he wrote kind of a very short, few paragraph backstory about what the prequels ended up being. And he basically said, the republic rotted out from inside out, and basically the danger was inside the republic, and they didn't recognize it, and it overtook them. So you see in the prequels that the republic was as complicit in the fact that they didn't recognize what was going on. They didn't recognize that this guy from inside was destroying them. They had the Jedi. They had the Jedi fighting all these wars throughout the galaxy, well, Palpatine had the Jedi fighting all these wars throughout the galaxy. The main point of him doing that, for one, it was a fictitious war. I mean, talk about we can talk about current things going on, and if you think really it's both sides of the same coin, just as a big distraction. That's what the whole Clone Wars was. It was basically Palpatine controlling both sides, having the Jedi going out there and fighting these battles that really had no point. I mean, it didn't matter who won these wars. He was still in control. But what he wanted to do was take the Jedi away from their main focus, which was really understanding the nature of the Force, understanding using discernment to figure out what dark elements were present in the universe, and trying to find a way to bring those out, bring that to light, to squash that. But Palpatine was smart enough to say, listen, let me get these Jedi away from their monk-like duties and roles, and getting them to fight all these wars. So now their head is filled with military strategy and not spirituality. You can compare that to a lot of religious organizations, like, whether it's the Catholic Church or even, Christianity. So to a certain extent, a lot of people focus on a lot of things that are outside of what they should really be studying and focusing on. And Palpatine got them away from that. So,
Right.
but to your point about the original trilogy and Indiana Jones, they really wanted to show that black and whiteness, right? Of these are the Nazis, these are the good guys. Whereas he layered on a lot of gray when he got to the prequel trilogy. But I will say you still see some elements of that in the original movie. One of the quotes I always go back to is what Tarkin said about the Death Star. He's like, fear is what will keep the galaxy in line.
Mm.
And that's the concept of fear is, we've seen that a million percent over the past few years. People scared to live their lives. People scared to go see their grandma in the hospital. People scared to go to church. People scared to go here, do that because of something with a minuscule, fatality rate.
Yeah.
So that works. Fear works on so many
And
levels,
and
and
willing to give up their rights and everything.
right. And you definitely see that in the prequels, like willing to give up their rights for something that is supposedly will keep them safe.
Mhm.
So yeah, but I think it's really just, the black and white. Then there's a lot of gray in the prequels.
Mhm.
Do you think that with the sequel trilogy, they were trying to change that perspective, because that perspective sort of can work and can kind of almost red pill people, and to use modern vernacular, in whatever time you're in. Do you think the sequel trilogy is following the same line, or is changing how they handle those sorts of ideas?
Well, what's interesting about the sequel trilogy, well, the problem with it is a lot of the stuff you really need to know about the politics of the sequel trilogy, it's not on the screen. Most of the important things you need to know about what those events are aren't even happening in the movies. You have to read supplemental materials or whatever. But a lot of people don't want to do that because the movies were put together so badly. They don't really even want to dive in to know more about it. Um, but what's interesting about the politics in that is you kind of saw this with Nazi Germany. After Nazi Germany crumbled, a lot of people thought, oh, hey, they're gone. We killed them. The bad guys are done. But as a lot of people know, a lot of those key players didn't really come to justice. A lot of those people came here. They started heading up NASA. They started working as scientists here in
Right.
America. So this is basically then this kind of the second generation of Nazis were kind of embedded in America,
Mm-hmm.
subversively. So you see that with the sequel trilogy. A lot of the main people in the Empire obviously die or get killed at the end of Return of the Jedi. But through a lot of the supplemental materials, through stuff like the Battlefront video games that have a lot of great cutscenes about this, Palpatine set up these systems to basically um, internally destroy a lot of the empire that existed, but keep a lot of people, keep a lot of the main generals and commanders and stuff in place so they can rebuild the empire. It's basically like a build back better type situation. What he did, he said, let's destroy most of the empire, keep some people in place, and they will rebuild this kind of thing. So that's when you see this First Order show up in the sequel trilogy. General Hux, who's kind of their military leader, he was the son of somebody who worked directly in the prior empire. So it's kind of like the second generation thing, but they obviously aren't as sound in Palpatine's ways and thinking, but he wanted it to kind of keep going on in perpetuity. But then you see somebody like Kylo Ren, who's kind of this just crazy knucklehead all over the place, crazy angry like millennial. Um, it's a really
With a
good
lot of
parallel.
power.
Yeah, he's very powerful, but he's just really like aggressive. He's all over the place. Um, it's like what you see when there's like family businesses and stuff, right? Like
Right.
a parents start a business and the kids run it.
Right.
Sometimes they run it right. Sometimes they're just like complete idiots and destroy the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this legacy he's trying to protect, this legacy of being Darth Vader's grandson, but he knows that he's nowhere near that. So they definitely kind of botched the whole idea of what Palpatine wanted to do, which I think is probably why they brought Palpatine back in the end for some reason. I'm still trying to figure.
Yeah,
I'm still.
that's
It just gives me a
it's a
headache.
whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast.
So, so if you have the prequel, or the original trilogy is sort of reaching back to that black and white cowboy, black hat, white hat, Nazi sort of idea. Prequels are what were the contemporary politics of that time, right? Rise of globalism. I think in a couple of interviews, he even identified the Bush regime as sort of helping to think through some of those things. Who's the First Order in the sequel trilogy? Who's that supposed to represent, and why is it Elon Musk? Just kidding.
that's a that's a good question. I don't know if it necessarily, in my mind, I'm sure if I think about this more, I'll probably have a better answer. But in my mind, it kind of represents, an environment where the current government is gone, and then what? And then what do you do? So there's a republic that it tries to reform. There's obviously an empire that tries to come back. There's constantly fighting back and forth over over power. Who's gonna win? Who's gonna not win? It's really hard to say because of how convoluted it all ended up being. What they were really trying to represent with that. I think the main thing, and like I said, is not a specific person or thing, but just the fact that you can't just defeat evil. You can't just defeat evil in like a series of battles. It doesn't go away. The philosophy, the mindset continues on in perpetuity. You
Mhm.
know, if it could have been defeated, they would have, when Rome fell, it would have been defeated. But it doesn't. It doesn't. It morphs into something else. And I don't really have a great answer. I don't really have a great answer for that of what they were trying to represent. I think they may have had it. I think just because they went through so many iterations of what they wanted that story to be, I think some of that stuff kind of got lost in translation along the way.
Right. Now, you said earlier there's some examples that you definitely wanted to cover in your book on how things look in our modern day, and just those same kind of tactics. Can you kind of go through some of those that you think are maybe relevant or most important that people didn't notice while watching these movies or thinking about? Because I think that happens often. We watch movies and they're like, "Oh, that's fantastical," like it's just amazing, and and they don't. It doesn't go past thinking this was great entertainment. But
Right.
we often don't think about the mind of the writers and producers and things like, or sorry, and directors. And there's definitely something deeper in even the most, I don't know, a roller coaster type kind of movie. There's always, I don't know, some sort of archetype that we can kind of look at and say that's important to look at in this way or another. But what are some of those key points that you think are especially relatable to our modern times?
Sure. One thing that you don't really see in the movies, but it's in like the Revenge of the Sith novel, which I would definitely recommend anybody that kind of has a bad taste in their mouth about the prequel movies themselves. I would look into reading some of those novelizations because I think they really flesh out a lot more of the characters' motivations and things like that. Because when it all goes down in the movie, I don't think they handled it the right way. I don't think the acting, the dialogue, anything, did what they meant to do story wise. But anyways, in the Revenge of the Sith novel, so we talked a little bit earlier about this war that's going on, right? There's this Republic versus Separatists, this whole Clone War thing. That's really a big fictitious thing. One thing you don't see in the movie, but you see in the novel, is that there's this thing called the HoloNet, which is basically like the TV, like the media of the time, and they're basically pumping out all this propaganda to the people of the Republic at the beginning of Episode Three, Revenge of the Sith, that listen, the Republic is losing the war. You still need to try to be all in for the troops, but also to keep pushing the fear, right? That if this battle keeps going on, the Republic could lose, and if the Republic loses, then what does that mean? Even so far as they were fighting against. The interesting thing is like the Republic had clones fighting for them, the Separatists had droids fighting for them. So one little piece of subversive propaganda they were pushing to the Republic was that listen, if we lose, it's going to be the robots are going to take us over.
Mm.
That's kind of the subtext of why you need to support the Republic in their leaders in doing whatever you need to do. So, and you kind of see this similarly to like a book like Orwell's 1984, where the media at the time is constantly telling them, well, listen, we're constantly in war with this other country, or we're in war with this other country. In fact, it may not have even have been an actual war going on, but it's just what the people heard. It was pumped into their brains over and over, so they believed it. And we see that nowadays too with all this stuff, especially with this Russia Ukraine thing. Which listen, I'm no deep researcher into what's going on there. I know something is not right, but we're getting all this propaganda about why we need to support Ukraine and why Russia is the bad guy. And maybe that's true to a certain extent, but does that mean we need to support him to the tune of $60 billion? I don't know. But we're constantly being bombarded with this propaganda about these wars going on or possible wars. You saw that after 9/11 as well, right? Like if we don't go get these terrorists, they're going to get us,
which is
or they're going to come here.
a very biblical concept, wars and rumors of wars. I think
Yes.
people tend not to see. And yeah, there's definitely stuff going on with Russia and things like that. But we see that throughout America. I mean, you want to get America riled up in its history, tell them communism, socialism, or globalism's taken over, and you can rile up the patriots. And that connects to
Yes.
a point you brought up earlier, which mixes in my opinion, with what Christianity looks like. Because in America, they've almost propped up patriotism higher than the actual belief in Christianity. So a lot of these kind of more cultural Christians will get inspired to do things that we normally shouldn't be doing, and it's perceived as Christianity just because, oh, in God we trust, and we pray to Jesus, and we make country songs about Jesus and all that. And so it just, it can kind of get lost in the weeds of, there's a greater narrative going on in the background, and there is a Palpatine like character driving both, capitalism and globalism, and these kind of communist things. And it's just, we never tend to look past what's in front of us, which is the propaganda machine and all that stuff, and don't look at the puppeteers in the background. And then there's definitely something there for sure. And it's unfortunate, because I do follow a lot of people on both sides, left and the right. I'm nowhere. I don't lean. I'm sure people think I lean towards a certain side, but I definitely don't lean towards a political ideology. I try to stay as dead center as I can. But looking at that stuff, I can see both sides getting equally riled up. Because on the right, I'll see, oh, look, he's getting triggered. But then I see the people on the right get triggered by other things. It's like everyone has a trigger point, and it's like these specific things going on. And I think a lot of these things are like financially motivated, economically motivated in the background. And you say that you bring that up in the book, I think, with what's happening in the Star Wars stuff, that seems to be this financial thing going on in the background as well. How do you write about that in the book?
Yeah, sure. And one quick point on what you were just saying. Yeah, like I think both sides need like an idol, somebody that they prop up, that like, this is the person who's really going to fix everything for us. Like for many years I was big on the Trump side, but now I'm kind of like you. I'm realizing that like both sides have many faults, and but they both push fear, right? Like the right pushes fear about China, the left pushes fear about Russia. And if you say that to either side, it gets them ramped up. Then they'll say, hey, well, let's send $30 billion to go fix these issues. But yeah, they all need like these heroes slash idols to come in and supposedly fix everything. And of course now it's like, Elon Musk. I've been talking about a lot of warnings about him, and what he really wants to do with robotics and all that kind of stuff, Neuralink. There's a whole rabbit hole to go down there. But yeah, you see that in Star Wars. There's a Palpatine's the puppet master, but also people are seeing him as the hero who's going to fix everything. And you hear that great line after they give him complete control. This is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause.
Ooh.
Everybody's cheering and clapping.
Probably my only favorite line in that movie, but you know what I mean. But yeah,
but yeah, to your point, as far as the financial stuff goes, yeah. In episode 2, Padme was trying to. Well, the Republic was trying to garner support for an army, which goes back to my point about the propaganda. They're constantly pushing this propaganda about this separatist army going to come in and take over, and it's going to be robotics and this and that. So they said, listen, we need to create an army. And she's like, no, like more war is not the answer. She's like, I saw it 10 years ago when they destroyed Naboo, and that didn't work out well for anybody, even though they were victorious in that war. She's like, it was still devastation and war, and it was not great for anybody. So she was trying to put these anti-war bills in Congress or the Senate or what have you. But one of her main points was that she's like looking around at all the other senators, and a lot of them are voting for more war because they own a lot of the manufacturing. They own a lot of the industries in the galaxy that manufactures weapons, that manufactures tanks and armaments and spaceships and all this stuff. So all these people are voting for more war because they're going to benefit off of it, directly. So you can see that 100% in what's happening in our world with all of the I can't think of the name specifically, but all those huge military industrial complex type organizations that a lot of government officials are financially in bed with. So any war that happens, in the banks as well, any war that happens, it really doesn't matter who ends up being victorious. The war machine in the / manufacturing factories, what have you, that keeps on going.
right.
So they'll be able to keep making money off of people's death and demise. And it's kind of a sad thing that, yeah, you see that in Star Wars, and you see that in our world too.
Yeah.
And it's also pretty telling that all of those politicians are literally on a completely different planet than all of their people. They don't see anything that's really going on. All the decisions are literally made on another planet.
Mm-hmm.
Probably that was the biggest, probably the only good point brought up in the last sequels was the character that sold weapons to both sides.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And he's like, there is no good or bad for me. I just, I'm funding both sides, and it's like the same person that hired me. So no big deal. It's just what it is. And I was just like, that actually happens very realistically in the world of today. That's just what it is. And people don't realize that. It's just like, that's happened in American history. I think one of the most known one is like, Henry Ford, selling stuff to Germany, Nazi Germany, and both America. And that's where the money came from anyways. Like, it was just very financially lucrative for him to participate in war. And we just kind of don't talk about it, and it's just, we just kind of move forward. But, I think you were thinking maybe of like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, all those like.
That's the ones I couldn't think of the name. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All those guys.
Yeah.
I saw a great meme before. It was like, all the politicians should wear like shirts like they do in NASCAR, but of all the people that they're financially in bed with, right? So like, whenever they're voting for this or that, okay, obviously we know why you're doing that.
Yeah, indeed. Now you brought another point up, and I really want to talk about it. I don't know if you talk about it in the book, but I'm sure you've noticed it. One of the, I guess you could say, conspiracies about Star Wars is to propagate transhumanism, and along with transhumanism, a new world religion. And I think one of the most successful parts of the Star Wars franchise for sure was to create a cult-like following of the religion of the Force. And, if people do a little bit of research, it connects to Taoism, it connects to different versions of Buddhism and things like that, which is often practiced in the world of theosophy and occultism and things like that. And, we like to look at it and think like, hey, this is fun. It looks great. And we all do. I for sure was trying to move things with the Force often. I was like, And, side note, which I think is hilarious. Every time I go to the doctor and people ask me, how did it go? I always tell them, they told me I have a really high metachlorian count, and they freak out. And they're like, what is that? What is that? Oh my gosh, are you okay? And I'm like, no, yeah, I'm pretty good. I was born with it. I can't really, but most people don't know what I'm talking about, and it's hilarious. So, if you're not laughing, listener, you need to watch some Star Wars. So that's all I'm saying. Anyways, going back to my point. So do you think, I guess connected to the totalitarianism aspect, which you talk about in your book, often people don't see the religion and the technology connection, and that would be called in the future, which we understand as technocracy, because definitely technology is something that is often used in order to control a mass group of people. And we see that now makes more sense than ever. And when we saw it maybe in Star Wars, it looks very much like maybe more physical, manifested, like a robot is actually in charge. And these things are actually the strong arm of the regime, or the strong arm of the government. I think there's a connection there for sure. And I don't know if you bring that up in your book.
Yeah, there's some interesting things about transhumanism with Star Wars. I think you kind of see it from a few different angles. The one biggest angle you see about transhumanism in the original trilogy is showing it as more of a cautionary tale. Just look at Darth Vader. He's one of the greatest, characters / villains of all time, but really he's just this kind of broken man inside of this metal suit that is basically more akin to like a coffin, right? But he's still alive, which is kind of like this whole concept of the metaverse or what have you, where it's like your soul can continue on in perpetuity even though you're not really physically present. But the idea with that is that he's this great imposing looking character. The character model of Vader is amazing. We all love Vader. But the idea is that what Obi-Wan says, he's more machine than man now. He's not. He's basically losing his humanity by having to live through all of this robotics. And the story at the end of it is that, well, he kind of snaps out of it. But I don't really think that in actuality it works that way. I think if transhumanism goes to really the way they want to, is like you're not gonna have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of like your fate to be this robotic slash person. So you kind of see that cautionary angle. Then of course you see the great moment at the end of Return of the Jedi where Luke is really starting to turn to the dark side, but then he looks at his hand, his metal hand, and he's like, "Listen, if I keep going any farther, I'm going to be just like my dad,
Mm.
living like this shell of a human in this robotic interface." And he kind of snaps out of it. So there's that cautionary aspect, but then they also, to your point, make it look really really cool. Like look at someone in the prequels like General Grievous, where he's got like the 6 arms and the 6 lightsabers and stuff. I'm like, that's like really cool looking, right?
Right.
As a kid, when you see somebody with like slashing 6 lightsabers
Oh
around, it
yeah.
looks pretty
Oh
awesome.
yeah.
But even the story behind him is that he was he was a physical, not necessarily human, an alien species that they basically wanted to perform experiments on him. They blew him up and took his heart, and that's why you see he has like this still beating heart. It's like a physical heart, but they put him in this metal suit, kind of like RoboCop kind of thing. And it's really cool, but also at the core of it, it's really making people more kind of subservient in that aspect. Very just same like I brought about RoboCop, same kind of concept. This guy was basically physically dead, but they put him in this robotic suit, but they can to a certain extent control what he wants to do. So yeah, it's definitely all about control and anything that they can implant or implement within us to create more control mechanisms that we will follow without question. They're gonna try to do it.
Yeah, that's what concerns me about like Elon Musk, for example, because a lot of people, especially on the right, are like, dude, he's our hero right now. Like, and because he's such an advocate for a lot of the things that the right advocates, they're like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You want to put a chip on us? That's cool. As long as I got my free speech and you put Trump back on Twitter, we're good now. So, and like they're totally dismissing the bigger, larger, nefarious agenda going on in the background, just because he agrees with some of your ideologies. And that I think it happens so much in. I mean, I see that happening in a lot of the stories in pretty much any war story and things like Star Wars and stuff like that are. That's why I think it's more and more relevant. That's me personally. That's why I love movies. Period. Like I'm not a huge like specifically just Star Wars fan. Like I love if a movie's really well written and then I can see these references to society. Like I'm like, oh, I see what you're doing here, and it just. I mean, I always question it. Is this propaganda or is this just a storytelling? Of course, you want to kind of step outside of it, but yeah, definitely. Uh, uh, any other examples or something that you definitely want to bring up? Or Maverick, Nikolai, do you have a question specifically you want to get off your chest?
Yeah, I was wondering on we've talked a lot about the authoritarianism in the Empire. It seems like, especially in episode 3, there's this discussion about how the Jedi are also blind. They've turned, and the idea is, I think they want to lean on they were duped, but at the same time, you know, Anakin throws out a lot of interesting ideas about the Jedi. Any thoughts on how maybe the structure of the Jedi plays into some of this?
Yeah, the Jedi, I would say they were basically like too self-righteous for their own good. I kind of I did a podcast maybe a year ago, kind of comparing, the Jedi Council to like back in Jesus's day, like the Pharisees or whatever the Jewish leaders of the time were.
Mm.
They knew all the right things, but they didn't put them into practice. They were both the Jedi and the group of Pharisees. They were all about the law, right? They're all about the law and order. Like these are the things you need to follow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You need to follow these specific things. To be a Jedi, you need to do this, this, and this. You can't have any attachments. And a lot of those things on their own in a vacuum may not have been bad things, but in certain situations that could cause somebody to go down the wrong path. And I think Palpatine knew that and was able to manipulate Anakin that way because especially the thing about you can't have attachments, which there's a lot of speculation about what that actually meant, but um, the idea was that you shouldn't have attachments to anybody, because that will bring an emotional response to the situations you deal with. You should really just be like this completely neutral type thing. But that actually wasn't the case. They were completely attached to the republic they served. They were completely attached to the government, which is very ironic, saying you can't have physical, romantic relationships, but
Right.
we can completely follow 100% what the government is telling us to
Yeah,
do.
and it reminds me a little bit, sorry to interrupt, of like the Taoist philosophy, where they say, do not attach yourself to anything, don't have any desires. And a Christian apologist asked them, why do you desire that? It's like easy debunking,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's like, you can't
Right.
do that. You have to, your heart has to attach itself in order to promote itself, the ideology that
Yeah.
you want. So it makes no sense.
And
but yeah.
and Anakin said that a lot, right? He said, "Well, as Jedi, we're encouraged to love
Right.
and care for people, because they're supposed to protect people, right? They were basically the protectors of all the people who couldn't defend themselves, regardless. So they were supposed to love and respect people, but the fact that they themselves were prohibited from doing certain things, it's just like, as a I'm a parent. It's like, you tell your kid not to do something, well, they're going to want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So yeah, to your point, I think the Jedi, maybe years before that, had noble intentions, but they couldn't see past their own self-righteousness. And they were, I would say, they were duped to a certain extent, but they definitely had to do a lot of self-reflection on what went wrong, especially Yoda and Obi-Wan. I think with this new Obi-Wan series coming out, maybe we're going to see some of that, a lot of the regret, and a lot of, why did the Jedi choose to go down this path? Because you talk about the attachment angle, like, look at Luke at the end of Return of the Jedi. He completely abandons that notion that you shouldn't have attachment. I mean, his attachment to his father and love for his father is what saved the galaxy, until Disney said it wasn't saved anymore. But that's
Right.
that debunks that whole thing. But then in some of the newer stuff, like the Mandalorian and the Boba Fett series, Luke Skywalker in the future is kind of reverting back to that whole thing about attachment. So it's kind of a mixed message there. But yeah, I agree with your point that the Jedi in and of themselves were duped by Palpatine, but also all the framework was laid for them to be completely misled, just because of their attachment to the government.
You can kind of see that the one line that they really use in the prequels, only a Sith deals in absolutes, which is very interesting because it's an absolutist statement. Just shows the height of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
What I was trying to connect. Yeah, what I was trying to connect with what you said earlier, Kyle, is that at one point Palpatine subverted their mind. Don't think about the spiritual, think about military tactics. And I was almost likening that to the Christians in the country, where I don't want you to think about your religious beliefs. I want you to think about what's good for our nation, more nationalistic. And there was that replacement, which when you do that, of course, it becomes very like the Pharisees, because the Pharisees were very much involved in the politics, and so much so that they became so self-righteous they didn't even see almost the purpose of their religion properly. Like, they weren't practicing it in a biblical manner, So it kind of
absolutely, like as a Christian myself, I try to like caution people. Listen, just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you automatically have to go to the conservative right. I mean, think about all the things that Jesus said about taking care of the poor, taking care of all these social issues, which people on the left typically care about, and a lot of people on the right kind of, like you said, kind of push that to the side. More like we got to help fund the military and all this stuff. It's like, no. There's things on both sides that you need to focus on. You just by having this belief, doesn't mean you're just shifted in one direction. I think you should question both sides. I mean, you should definitely question the people that the people are propping up to be these idols. I mean, my God, you want to talk about some like blasphemous crap? I mean, so many pictures I've seen over the years of like, Trump with like a sword and like, Jesus standing over his shoulder. I'm like, guys, you guys are so far off track with what you should really be
with like a crusader armor. I've seen that anyway.
Yeah. It's like, come on. I don't know if you guys are even reading the Bible at all.
Yeah,
I did like the new ones where he's in this like super like Mega Man suit, and it's with MAGA Was Super
Oh, like
MAGA?
Super Mag or whatever. Yeah.
That I do like the new ones for
MAGA
sure.
man.
So in light of all of that, why is Qui-Gon such an important character then?
Oh, yeah. Qui-Gon, I will say, is probably the best out of all the Jedi Masters. For one,
Gone too
he
soon.
has. Oh, go ahead.
I know. I just said gone too soon.
Yeah, right. Lucas always kills off the best characters in the
Yeah.
first movie of every trilogy. Um, he for one, he kind of had this perception about the universe, about really trying to understand what was going on. He has a great line, which I have, I think in the intro in the book, is that, secrets, he says this in the novel, the Phantom Menace novel. He's like, secrets need to be revealed whenever you find them. Like, if you stand if you stand to conceal these secrets, you're almost as complicit as people that are committing terrible acts. So he really wanted to expose bad things going on, but also he wanted to, he knew that everybody had a purpose. And, whenever they kind of pulled Jar Jar along, at the beginning, Obi-Wan was like, oh crap, here we go. Just another crappy creature. But for some reason, Qui-Gon thought that he had a purpose. Um, you can, and I will say, you can argue that Jar Jar's purpose was really to help Palpatine bring on the Empire, in
Right.
the next movie. But you saw that again with Anakin. Qui-Gon saw this young kid. He's like, there's really something to him. He's like, I don't care that the Jedi Council doesn't agree with me taking him on. He's like, I'm using my own intuition. I'm not just blindly following what the council is telling me. I want to train him. And, in the end, several movies later, yeah, he did end up, saving this kid did end up saving the universe. Obviously, he went through a lot of trials and terrible stuff to get there, but he was ultimately right. And Obi-Wan, told him, he's like, Master, like, if you would just follow the rules, you could be on the Jedi Council. No, Qui-Gon's just like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to just blindly serve this Jedi Council dogma, because that that removes that kind of, well, I hate to use this term, but that outside the box thinking, right? Like he understood things on such a deep spiritual level that he knew the more entrenched he got with the Jedi Council, the more entrenched with the government, it's going to water down and dilute some of those beliefs. So I
Right.
agree with you. I will say Qui-Gon is the most important. He's definitely probably like the libertarian, I guess, of the Jedi, if you had to kind of put him in a political camp, because he's like, I know a lot of this stuff. He knew a lot of the faults of the Jedi. He knew a lot of the faults of the dark side,
Mhm.
and he tried to work within that framework, but he always pushed back against his own side whenever he thought they were doing something wrong. So, I would say he's probably the best out of all of the Jedi.
Mhm.
Mm.
I feel like the Jedi Council were looking towards him and were just like, "Shut up, Rand Paul." You know what I mean? Like one of those things. I'm not
exactly.
giving Rand Paul any credit here, but I just feel like he's the outcast, and he's like, "Hey man, shut up over there, dude! Like stop asking those questions." You know?
Right.
I got one last quick question, and then I'm kind of done with the questions I had pre-prepped. So there's a lot of rumors running around on 4chan that you are Raylo. Is that correct? Can you set the record?
That I'm into the Raylo.
Yeah, you're a Rayloer.
Oh God.
Is that true?
I I I I can't even with that whole thing. I don't know. No, I'm not. I'm not in.
Okay, all right. So correct the record.
Cool. That one flew over my head, so I don't know what's going on there, but
It's okay. You can search it later.
Yeah, it's like people have all this fan fiction about them like being the thing, and
Mm.
in perpetuity, and yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. But it is interesting though. You see Disney is the one time in the sequel trilogy that there's a kiss between a biological male and a biological female, and then the dude dies immediately, right? So Disney's telling us, what happens when biological males and biological females interact. It
You
shouldn't be that way.
definitely see a lot of things like that dying in Disney content.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's a whole different.
They definitely shifted away from anything possibly romantic
Mhm.
in that sequel trilogy, and I think you see that in a lot of Disney movies recently too. There's really not ever that, like, the prince finds the princess and they fall in love. there's really none of that in any modern, I would say, for the past 20 years, Disney products, because it's like they want us to all be isolated. They don't want us to have, a partner that we can share our lives with. It's a whole. There's probably way more areas that we could even get into with that. They'd rather us, trust the government, like you said, or politicians or Elon Musk or whatever, not have these romantic relationships. So it's kind of crazy.
Probably do a whole other show on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's something that we bring up a lot in the show. Very intentional, I believe. The destruction of tradition and Western civilization, the morals that we used to stand for and things like that. Kyle, anything else that you wish people asked you, but just people never do, and you're like, dude, they never ask me about this, and I want to say it. And so if that's something that you have and you want to get off your chest, please do.
Oh man, that's a great question. I can't think of anything.
Okay.
I can't think of anything.
Okay. Well, any final last words then before we kind of wrap this up? Because I have one more request. But other than that, what would you like to tell the folks that listen to Fire Theft Radio? What is your purpose of this book? And, what can you expect, or what are you trying to do in their minds,
Sure.
with this literature that you put out?
Sure. I want to thank you both for having me on. This has been great. I love talking about this stuff. It can go in so many different directions. We could probably do 2, 3, 4, 5 more episodes just on some of the little subtext stuff we kind of hinted at. But so the book is out. I'll shamelessly plug it here.
Of course.
You can't see it because it's audio only.
Right.
But it's called Intergalactic Totalitarianism. You can find it on Amazon in paperback. There's a Kindle version. I just put out the audiobook version. And actually, I don't know how long it's going to take to do, but I'm actually working on just like a video documentary kind of version of it.
Is it you?
Well.
Is it you doing the audio version of it?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I love
I do
that.
It all myself. I add music in the background.
Oh, perfect. I love that more than when they get professionals. Because I can't. I just can't. There's so many books that I have, and when they're just there and they're like, they sound like Morgan Freeman, I just can't listen to it. Like I can't do it. It's too proper.
As I was writing it, like there's certain inflections and certain punctuation I wanted to put on certain parts that like you can't really get somebody else to do it. And also I'm cheap.
Yeah.
So, I like doing it myself, right? I like, you guys like doing podcasts. Like it's fun. It's fun to do. It's a really fun, a kind of escape thing for me. But yeah, like I said, I'm actually working on like a video documentary style version of it as well, which will be maybe an hour and a half, just grabbing a bunch of clips from the movies, clips from other interviews, articles and stuff that all kind of tie into the kind of what I'm trying to say here. Because the purpose of it, I would say, is kind of twofold, right? It's if there's people out there that really like Star Wars and really aren't too deeply entrenched in a lot of kind of the conspiracy type stuff, it's a good kind of segue into introductions, basically, to like thinking about what the government does and what happens in our world, kind of on a deeper level that you're not going to see on the news. And then secondarily, and definitely not as important, people that already understand kind of some of this stuff, it's to get people to just add a little bit more appreciation for those prequel movies, because the movies themselves, I 100% agree that they're not great. They're not great, right? The acting is not great. Too much green screen, too much blue screen, not enough physical stuff. But I think the story he was trying to tell is a really great story. So definitely, I wanted to kind of put some of those elements in this book, just so people can understand more or less, not necessarily the physical manifestation you saw on the screen, but like what the story underlying was trying to tell. Because I think it's a really great cautionary tale about trusting the government to keep you safe. Understanding manipulation and propaganda and stuff like that in our world. It's definitely very relatable as kind of just a template to a lot of events in our world currently, historically, and in the future.
Very well. And last thing, and this is for both of you guys, your best impersonation of your favorite character on Star Wars. Go.
Beep, boop, beep, boop.
Oh, beep. Was that R2D2?
Yeah, that was R2D2. It's pretty good, huh?
Go, Kyle. You.
Okay. Let me try my best Yoda here. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
That's pretty good.
That was good. Thank you.
That's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. I wish I could do one. I was trying to think if I could do like Jabba the Hutt or something, but I don't know. I don't know none of his actual language that he speaks. Like how he does.
Just like make a deep voice, just go boo stop boo doo.
Yeah.
It works.
It's
like baby language.
You should do a special edition of the book where you narrate as Yoda.
Oh, I know the whole book just in almost reversed sentences and all that.
It.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yes, indeed. All right. So that's all we got for you folks. Kyle, stick with me. The folks are going to listen to some dope music. I'll probably put some remixed Star Wars so I don't get in trouble or something like that. But we'll be right back.